24/7 private home rental complaint, 24/7 complaint response training. Key elements: agent's availability, obvious. Agent's responsibility or responsiveness, obvious. Agent's knowledge of the Big Bear Lake Transient Private Home Rental Ordinance requirements, obvious. Agent's follows through, obvious, all key elements. The bottom line here is that if you get a complaint and you don't know anything about the ordinances, you don't have a clue as to whether there's any validity to the complaint or not. What happens is we have a 24/7 code compliance complaint hotline, 909-866-CODE or 866-2633. It's 24/7. Get all kinds of calls to that hotline. Last year we got approximately 600 and just between 650 and 660 calls to that hotline. They range. Only, I think, out of those 650 to 60 calls, 425 or so actually related to a transient private home rental use. And of those are were identified as potentially a transient private home rental use. Of those, only about 250 actually related to a private home rental. So we get a lot of calls to that hotline. You will only get a call as a 24/7 response agent if you are handling a registered and approved private home rental. You'll get the call because you're identified as the contact for that private home rental. If it's a complaint regarding a purported private home rental that's not identified in our registration, then the code officer will automatically get that call to go out and take a look and see what the problem is it a valid problem, and is it an illegal private home rental. So when you get the call, you're only going to get the call because you're identified as the 24/7 response agent for that address. All right? Key issues: noise. Number one complaint. Number one, a lot of people are under the false perception that disturbance of the peace only occurs after 10 p.m. Not true. Disturbance of the peace can occur at any time of the day or night. The question is how loud is it? What's the nature of the noise? What's the nature of the disturbance? With noise, it could be a boombox out on the rear deck blaring at 100 decibels. It could be people talking on the deck and yelling and screaming at each other. That's a legitimate disturbance of the peace. What we're asking for with regard to noise is that in the ordinance, and this is not in the transient private home rental ordinance, this is in our municipal code under the sound provisions, no amplified sound is permitted between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. This is also in the municipal code under our sound element. Noise is limited to 65 dBA at property line or decibels at property line between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. 55 decibels at property line between 7 and 10 p.m. 45 decibels at property line at 10 to 7 a.m. We have sound meters. All my code officers have sound meters. We will go out and measure sound if we need to with you if there's an issue. Our primary recommendation is including your contractor provision that states that all outdoor activities shall be ceased at 10 p.m. What people fail to see is that our community is located in such that most of our residential neighborhoods are located in valleys surrounded by slopes, hillsides, and noise echoes tremendously. If you're sitting out on side your deck and you're talking in a normal voice, it potentially can be disturbing if you got a house that's right next door to you, that's got a bedroom window with the slider or a bedroom slider that's open because it's summer and people are trying to sleep. but you're in a spa or hot tub out on a deck and you're partying and having a good time. Don't want to stop people from having a good time, but they need to use common sense when they're dealing with the privacy and peace and tranquility of others. Again, you should investigate noise complaints. That can be simple. It can be a call to the guest, as simple as a call saying, hey, we're getting complaints that you're being very loud. You get a guest that says, you know what, we have been loud, very sorry, we're going to bring it inside, we're going to do whatever it needs. It's done, it goes away, no additional complaints. You've done your due diligence, you provided a meaningful response. Our code hotline gets a second call with regard to the same issue the same night. Now the code officer is going to call you as the identified 24/7 complaint agent and say, meet me out there. All right? What will happen is you and the code officer will then see what's going on. Be observant. Don't just roll up, bang on the door. We told you to knock it off. You pull up, you listen. Is there really an issue? If there's no issue, if it's all quiet, you never disturb the guest. The code officer says, hey, don't know what's going on, but it's all quiet now. You've responded with me, meaningful response, we're done. However, you pull up and they're partying hardy, or they're out on the deck and yelling and screaming, or whatever the noise complaint is, obvious they're violating people's peace and privacy, then you go talk to them. If they refuse to comply, they're drunk, disorderly, then that's when the code officer will take it to the next level, which would be potentially citation if they don't comply or voluntarily comply, potentially bring in law enforcement, and potentially in an eviction along with the citation. You're there, you're doing your job, you're trying to meaningfully respond to the issue. No issue with us. We verify you're doing that. We assist you in dealing with that issue. Okay? You need an issue, or you have an issue like excessive noise, loud, unruly, drunk, disorderly, call the code officer. If it's a dangerous situation, you're being threatened, call 911. All right? If you can back out peacefully and remove yourself from that threatening position, call the 866 code or 2633 number, ask to have the code officer call you. He will. I've got a code officer on duty 24/7. They will assist you with that issue. If you identify for that code officer that this person threatened you, he can then meet you off-site, having prearranged to have the sheriff's deputies via a radio call meet all at the same time to deal with the situation. So we are there to partner with you to assist you. Okay? So noise is an issue that can occur at any time of day. Parking. We get a lot of calls during the daytime on parking. They're parked on the street. Yes, they're allowed to park on the street at a private home rental between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. However, the caller says, you know what, we've got 30 cars out here and everybody's saying they're staying the night. You're going to get that call and you're going to be expected at a minimum to call the guest and reinforce that their contract says after 11 and between 7 a.m., X number of people are only allowed to stay there. Do you understand? Yes, we understand. We're just having a party. We've prearranged this. These people are all staying at different units. All right? Probably you're going to have more than one unit registered. You may want to follow up and check with your check to see if they have additional units if you represent more than one unit. But the bottom line is, don't just let it go because it's between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. that the cars are out there. Do a little follow through in advance. Save yourself that 11 o'clock call because potentially they're going to cop to, well, we had more people show up. Well, you're going to need to make different arrangements because you're going to have to get accommodations for those over X number of people. Try and keep it from becoming an 11 o'clock issue for you and the code officer. Parking on adjoining properties. We've had issues where people have too many vehicles show up and they park them in others' driveways, they park them in others' yards, they park them in the non-designated parking spaces on site at your unit, they park it out in the yard, they run over plants, etc. Please make sure as a part of the contractual thing that when you're reviewing as an in-person check-in person, you give them those parking passes. You tell them. They've acknowledged there's a maximum of 3 cars or 4 cars or whatever it is. If they're parking everywhere in the yard, they're parking in other people's driveway, you need to respond to that complaint and you need to deal with the car parking issue. Again, parked on the street till 11, not an issue, but maybe you can get them to acknowledge that, no, this is actually going to stay this way. Vehicles must display parking passes. You should give them the parking pass, the correct number of parking passes for each private home rental unit based on the maximum number of designated parking spaces available. Parking spaces are 9 by 19. They can be tandem. It can be an enclosed garage. They can be the driveway and the garage. That number, no, we don't make the garage available, so it's just driveway. Well, the driveway is 38 feet long and 20 feet wide, so that's 2 cars parked tandemly front and back, so that makes it 4 cars maximum. So whatever that on-site parking availability needs to be enforced, and you need to look at that. Overcrowding is the next big issue. Maximum number of transient private home occupants at the units between 11 and 7 a.m. is that which is posted on the sign, on that exterior sign we've already talked about. It is based on 200 square foot per occupant living area. That was discussed during the ordinance adoption process. It is based on technical requirements of the building code. The building code under Table 10 identifies an occupant load factor of single-family residences of 200 square foot per occupant. That's the accepted occupant load factor. That's what was used. That's what's in the ordinance. Complaints regarding overcrowding between the hours of 7 and 11 p.m. must be responded to. Again, that can be as simple as a phone call. Hey, you've got 40 people there. What's going on? Oh, we're just having a family reunion. Again, we got multiple units. If their excuse sounds reasonable, you let it go. If for some reason it appears that you get the indication that they're actually going to have those people staying there, maybe you need to act earlier. But come 11 o'clock, that second call comes in, you're going to have a code officer calling you to say, meet us there, because now we have a second report that it's overcrowded and it's 11 o'clock. Over occupancy, if they don't comply by getting separate guest facilities for those in excess of the maximum occupant load, will result in citation and eviction. All contracts must identify the maximum number of transient private home rental occupants permitted to stay at that unit for the rental period. Trespass issues get a lot of this, both summer and winter. Not so much in the mountain areas during the summer. That's pretty much the lake areas. We also get calls during the winter, not so much along the lake, but up in the mountain areas adjacent to ski resorts, trespass. Be surprised what people do. They snowplay, they build snow berms in people's driveways, they use their decks, they use their barbecues, they fish off their docks, they use the spas if the lid isn't changed down. If for some reason they manage to get into the house, they will get into the house. It's quite incredible. They will use play equipment if that's out on the deck. of adjoining houses. Clearly, your contracts must identify compliance with all local codes and regulations. And I would, if you're in a snow play area or a lake area, I would specifically identify trespassing as a violation. Docks has become an issue. People say that people are trespassing because they have a lakefront property or a property that abuts the lake, and that people are walking along the lake shore behind their house. That is not trespass. The property line is at the high water line of the lake. When the lake recedes, that exposed area, which is not covered by water, is actually owned by the municipal water district and is permitted to have public access pursuant to recreational use requirements or ownership provisions of the municipal water district. However, the deck or the dock is private property. They have a permit for that, they maintain it, they have regulations for it, but it's in the county. I don't enforce trespass in the county. I don't have the authority. That's the sheriff's. However, I would put in provisions just for peace and tranquility and clearly identifying for your guests at a lakefront or a house that has lakefront access or nearby access to the lake, that they should stay off people's private property and off docks, because it is technically trespass and would be a violation, particularly if they're being belligerent or damaging about it. Trash and debris, get all kinds of things. We get people that take their trash, they bag it up, but then they leave it at in front of the house next door to them at the street, assuming, I guess, somebody's going to pick it up. They throw trash and debris because they don't particularly like the looks of the person that's next door. So on the deck, they have a couple of beers and decide it's appropriate to throw beer cans onto the deck next door, or trash or other debris. They throw their cigarette butts off the deck onto the adjoining properties. Basically, again, you're getting a trash debris complaint call, you need to investigate it. That is something you're probably going to have to go out and look at, because people are just going to say, no, we haven't left any trash anywhere. Well, you can go out and do some feather smoothing with the neighbor next door. You can identify, it's clear and obvious without contacting anybody that you've got stuff strewn everywhere, whether it's the rental property or adjacent to the rental property. So those you need to take seriously, particularly when you get the call about trash left on the deck or outside or in bags at the front of the property or an adjoining property. With coyotes and bears, et cetera, it'll be all over the place, and then you got a big mess to pick up, because we will be calling you, telling you to pick it up. So try and respond to those appropriately. Make sure that, in line with that same thing, make sure that the required trash site maps are in your documentation. Make sure that your owners know where those trash sites are. If you don't have a provision included in your contract that they are just to leave the trash there, and you'll do that as a part of the rental. Some agencies, some owners choose to do that. Penalties. Penalties are violation dependent, and that means the nature of the violation, whether a violation is issued, and who the violation is issued to. It is always preceded by a verbal and written warning, followed by continued violation or repeat violations with citation and subsequently eviction. Those can occur very rapidly depending on the nature of the violation. The last one is revocation of business license and transient private home rental unit registration. What I've talked about is verbal and written warning. Citation and eviction has been specific to guests. As the rental agent and subsequently the responsible rental agency or property owner those citations could end up going to you and the rental agency and the property owner. Because if you're not diligently following up with complaint response, and we verify that, then we're going to cite all negligent parties associated with that. Have we ever issued a citation? No. As I've, for those types of things to a property agent or managing agency, no, we have not. Why? Because we have a partnership. We've agreed. We will verify. If you're doing everything you can to meaningfully address the issue associated with the complaint, we're not going to cite you. We're not going to cite the property owner. We're not going to cite the compliant managing agency. Reason being is you're doing your job. Who will we cite? We will cite the violating party, the guest that refused to comply with the verbal and written notice. Who will we evict? We will, with you and potentially law enforcement, as we have done in the past, we will evict the property owner. In your contract, or the guests, in your contract, you should have eviction provisions. You don't comply, you will be evicted, you will forfeit all funds and deposits. That should be standard in your contract. The only time we would ever get to the revocation of a business license and a transient private home unit reservation is if we had habitual noncompliance on the part of a management agency, an owner-manager, with regard to the violations, which resulted in verbal written warnings, the issuance for a particular single unit of 3 citations within a rolling 12-month period, I will yank the registration. We'll revoke the business license and suspend that unit from registration for 12 months. In the case of a management agency, because they handle multiple units, management agency can get up to 6 violations within a rolling 12-month period. I have never issued more than 1 violation to a management agency, and I've done that a couple of different times because they received warning about an unregistered unit and didn't diligently follow through with registering that unit, completing the registration, and rented it even though they had warning, both verbal and in writing. So the only couple of citations we've ever issued to a management agency, okay? We don't like to do it. We want to partner with you guys, whether you're an owner-manager, whether you're a rental agency. We're partners. This is a cooperative effort. We want your industry to thrive and flourish. Again, you are responsible for ensuring that your TPHR guests comply with all ordinance requirements. Will we assist you with that? Absolutely. When you have switch. Right button. No. Why did it skip? Oh, there it is. So again, key elements. Familiarize yourself with special occupancy conditions that may be in the contract if you're a response agent, because you may overlook something that they're violating that's in the contract if you don't know that that provision is there. Meaningful complaint response can be as little as a phone call, but you need to follow up and make sure when you're making that phone call, you get the real good feeling that they're going to comply. A call will result in a code officer response with you. That doesn't mean you're guilty of anything. There's no assumption on the code officer's part that you didn't give a meaningful response. And in fact, what I'm going to talk about next is report your complaint response back to the 24/7 complaint hotline. Put that in your cell phone, 866-2633. That should be in your cell phone. That way you recognize the call when it comes in. That way you got it when you call them back and say, you know what? The guests, I made a phone call, the guests acknowledged they were being loud and unruly, and they said that they would comply. The operator notes that in the complaint log. Our code officer is told that when he's called on a second complaint. It shows that you're being diligent in your response, okay? But our assumption is that you are. It's not that you're guilty of not responding, it's that you are. It's like the law. You're innocent until proven guilty, all right? We don't make any assumptions. We are out to make sure compliance is attained and that you're going to help us to get there and do that. And we are there to help you to do that. So call the 866 code number for assistance if you've got unruly guests. Never, ever ignore a dangerous situation and stay in it. And if you need emergency assistance, call 911. Back out. Get away. Don't deal with people that are aggressive and threatening. We'll help you with that. Law enforcement will help us with that. My code officers are told emphatically, I tell myself emphatically, standing in front of the mirror, you will remove yourself from those situations. Do not exacerbate them. Do not accelerate them. Get out of them. We don't have guns. We don't have badges on purpose. We don't have Kevlar vests. Looks bad? Go. Go back when you have the people with the badges, the guns, and the Kevlar vests. Don't hesitate to call for assistance, please. We are partners.